So we'll do a quick review on the kit that I have. Now this is a Lona tool from AutoZone. It's a power built model 648748. It's about 65 bucks if you want to keep it. They do loan their kits out. If you want to keep it, you're allowed to. You just pay the price of it. This is a brand new kit, so I don't know if I'm going to keep it or not. Depends on how many times I ever think I'm going to take steering wheels off. But there's quick instructions, things like that. This is your bolt that helped us remove the steering wheel. Had a little collar that came off the little piece here, and we use these two bolts right here to go down the steering wheel, and then this bolt right here to pull it off. And then since we had a narrow steering wheel, this is the horseshoe type clamp we used, and one of the collar bolts here to remove it, the nut and the washer. Now there are puller legs in here. There's a pivot pin remover. There's different size for probably metric cars. Different array of bolts for the steering wheel. So this is what they call the master kit. It is designed to take off more than just a 1970 Monte Carlo steering wheel. It's a pretty good kit, but you can get it at your AutoZone. Now you know the part number if you want to inquire to get the kit to do the job. Alright, so we're going to get to the steering wheel here. I'm going to try to go through the window if at all possible. I don't get too much glare. On the back side of that, right about here, it's hard to print or point. Right there, you're going to have screws. One on the far edges and towards the center of the steering column. Those are what Aaron's going to go ahead and try to get off now so that we can get to those screws, see if that front plate comes off without damaging it. Alright, so you can see he's going to the back side there, going to get those screws in there. They are tight, so they're going to take a lot of force. It may require, you know, moving the turning signal, or not the turning signal, the steering wheel back and forth to clear the gear shift, the start switch for the key, and the turning signal lever itself. So Aaron's going to get started on that, see if we can get that apart, and then we'll catch up here in just a minute. Alright, so we got the screws off the back. They're at a weird angle. We were able to use a full-size screwdriver. Once that happens, it just comes off. Real simple to do. This case, we have a wrap steering wheel. The original owner put that on there, so we had to finagle that a little bit. Here's the plate. Your switches, if in case your horn wasn't working, you could get in there, fix that while you're doing it. Very rudimentary wiring. Somebody's had this apart before, because you can tell there's electrical tape, and I doubt GM did that, and it's relatively new. This is your spring, your connector for your steering wheel buttons for your horns. So just put this aside, be very careful. I'll clean this up when it goes back on. You can see it's got a little bit of wear on it, which is fine. I mean, this is an original car. I don't expect this to be new. I'm glad I didn't drop it there. But that's what it is. If you do want to get in and replace this piece here, couple simple screws probably just come off, and then you can pop that center piece out. I may do that. We may do that to go in and clean this gunk out from hands from years doing, you know, steering on this. So that's the steering wheel. We're going to get to move to this nut. We're going to get that nut off there, and then we're going to pull the steering wheel off, and we'll show you the video on that. All right, so we used a 7/8 inch socket on this. He's going to go ahead and turn that. We locked the steering wheel. I'm just going to hold it. It didn't give us much problem, but I don't recommend locking the steering wheel and then using that to capture or hold the steering wheel where you're trying to take this nut off. Again, you don't want to tear anything up, cause yourself any grief, and that's what we're trying to prevent here, is any further grief tearing stuff up. So here's the nut. We're going to put that into our parts holder, and then now we will go ahead and apply the steering wheel removal tool and get that out next.
I'm going to need both.
Alright, so we're going to go ahead, yeah, you're going to use both. We're going to go ahead and put the steering wheel puller on there. Hold on just a second. In this particular case, there's a couple of different steering wheel pullers. Some of them have a divot in the center of the shaft itself, some don't. If you don't, you're going to apply this little collar on there for a flat surface. It's going to go against that center bolt. We're going to put these screws into each side, and when they go into each side, one will go through the slot here that's already in. We're just going to slide that in. This one, then we'll thread it down. Then we're going to drive this down to gently pull that steering wheel off to cause no damage. Now in the past, I have pulled these out and manhandled the hell out of them to get them out. Problem is, you're putting all that steering column under stress. This is a 50-year-old car. Again, we don't want to tear anything up because I don't want to replace anything I don't have to. So Aaron's going to go ahead and get this bolted up and get us going on it. And when he's doing that, the side bolts, You want to drive those down as far as you can because you want to get as much of the thread in that steering wheel as possible. You want to use the right bolts. You don't want something that's going to be the wrong thread and you get like a 1/4 inch bite on it and then you think you're going to take that steering wheel off. That's under a lot of compression to keep that steering wheel on there. We don't want to tear anything up because if we booger that steering wheel up, I no longer have a standard or an OEM steering wheel. So he's got it all fitted up. He's going to just snug it up, make sure everything's level, and then I'm going to find the socket he needs and we're going to gently pry this thing off. So we're using a 1/2 inch socket and he's just going to gently start pulling the steering wheel off. Snug those up.
I'm loosen them because it's not even.
Alright, so what he's doing now is he's leveling this plate up because we don't want that to go into a bind because it will pull the steering wheel into a bind. When that happens, you're going to be 3-4 times harder getting that damn steering wheel off than normal. So he's leveling up the plate, making sure that it goes and pulls on that steering wheel evenly. It's a quick pop, couple turns, probably not even a 1/2 turn to a full turn. It already just popped loose and the steering wheel is going to gently pull out now. So steering wheel's in place. You can see just a closer representation, how the bolts went in there, what we're dealing with on the back, things like that. Now, be careful when you pull it off straight so you don't booger up this right here. This is your horn connector. And when we put this back together, we're going to clean that connector up on both sides. The horn side, the plate we removed, and this, and we'll put some dielectric grease on it. Alright, so in our case, we didn't have Torx bits like on a couple SS models that we've dealt with or seen in the past. So he's just going to remove these 3 Phillip tip screws to get them out of the way. We're going to put them in our parts holder. That will expose that plate, and we'll get to removing the plate here in just a minute. And see, I'll speed this up so you're going to be doing it lightning fast. And delete the sound because I don't like it when people like that. Just delete the sound. Alright, so this is the plate that came off. The screws are in place. Looks like there's some catches on 2 of them. One's missing, no big deal. Probably down in there. This is just a cover plate. Some vehicles have it, some don't. Don't be surprised if yours doesn't have it if somebody has done this work before and didn't put it back in place. What is left here is basically a kind of like a star, like a Chinese star looking things with a bunch of cut grooves on the side. When you turn the ignition backwards, this is keyed right here. A little piece is going to pop up into one of these grooves and lock your car. Now, if you've ever been on a hill and your steering wheel's turned or you can't get the ignition to crank over because your steering wheel's in a bind, it is exactly that. You have gotten this collar or this plate in a bind against that, and you have to move the steering wheel ever so slightly to get your key switch to work. That's what's happening inside. So now you know what's going on inside your vehicle. We're going to go ahead, any more screws we'll remove, and we'll get to that plate next. Alright, so I will leave a description or a link in the description of what kind of kit we have here. So to get that off, we're going to use a 9/16 to 18, basically like I'm going to call it a collar, a bolt with a collar on it, because this is going to thread down onto the steering column bolt itself. Aaron's going to go ahead and get that on there. It goes over. That's going to protect the splines, cover all that, because you're going to get in there with a screwdriver trying to get this I'm going to call it an oh Jesus clip, and the reason is when it flies, oh Jesus, where did it go? Because you're going to try to find it. This is a horseshoe piece that's going to go on next. I'm going to get a washer and a bolt. What that's going to allow us to do is to compress down that Chinese star looking thing, the lock ring or the lock plate is probably what it's called. It's going to allow us to compress that down and get to the oh Jesus clip. Now, if I remember correctly, the oh Jesus clip is just a very strong springed clip with a cut in it. So you're just going to take some flathead screwdrivers, get in there, wiggle it out, get it out. The good thing is if it pulls up all the way, this is going to keep it from flying, hitting you in the face, things like that. So that's going to be our next step, is to move towards that. But what this does is compresses this lock ring down to expose that oh Jesus clip that we can get out. All right, so after much complaint that Dad didn't have the right tool, We're gonna go ahead and let him use the screwdriver and do this. And I told him, my car, but he screws it up. Now he's gonna get an ass beaten for this, but he's gonna try it. Really, it's just a ring clip that you're just gonna get in with a screwdriver, pry it up. You can buy a special tool if you want to remove them. This is not the ring clip that has the little circles on the end that you use the right pliers with little tips on them to open up and get out. This is just a rudimentary clip before they really started doing things intelligently. So we're going to leave it up to Aaron to get this thing off. You're just going to pry one side at a time, and once you get it started, it's relatively easy. And then we're almost into the home base here on this one. All right, here you go. I'm giving you a bunch to choose from because you can figure what will work best for you. That's why that collar goes down over top of that. Now I have experience removing those if you aren't able to do it.
It just spins. I don't really have a good way to take it apart.
Well, I don't think you're going at it the wrong way. You don't pry it like that.
I mean, I can't get it.
You got to get underneath an edge, cut edge, and then just pop it.
But I'm trying.
On the back side of it. On the back side of it.
The back side. The side that spins every time I apply pressure to it.
Can I give it a try? Only I have experience doing this. This is not my first one.
I'm gonna do it.
You're trying to pry that. You're never going to be able to pry it.
I'm trying to get my screwdriver underneath of it, but I can't because every time I do something, it moves. It's just spinning.
Yeah, but what I'm telling you is you're going at it the wrong way already.
Just let me do it.
Well, that's the problem. I don't want it to get screwed up. There is a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this.
I'm not gonna screw it up. What are you doing?
You should just be able to go from the back side and pop it out of place. Like that. I mean, you had it up a little bit, and if you could do that, I could get underneath it with this screwdriver and get it.
I just don't want to screw up this shaft.
Well, I don't want you to either. Try to open it up like you did.
I'm trying to get one screwdriver to hold it and the other one to move it.
Yeah, if you could just pop it up a little bit. Look, we had it.
I'm gonna get a screwdriver in the face.
Alright, now you can just work it off. We're on the other side over by me. Watch that switch.
Hands in the way.
Too far down. You're going to have to go from... Nope, you're working on the side that's not down. Work from my side, please.
I can't.
You're going to go towards my side of that little thing there. You're going to get under...
I can't.
You're going to have to. I can
Your
move.
hand is in the way.
Then tell me to move.
I told you 3 times that your hand is in the way.
Okay, so now you're too far. You're not on the spring. You're down in the groove. Alright. You're going to need a bigger screw. I mean, I can see what I'm doing here. But can you hold this screwdriver that I'm holding? No, I don't want you to go from the bottom. I don't want it broken. Stop.
It's not going to break.
I'm asking you to stop. I'm asking you to stop.
It's not going to break.
I'm asking you to stop. Because we're just going to go from each end of it.
Literally what I tried doing, it just slips out. I don't want to break that horn pin either.
And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Lift your screwdriver up more. Hold it.
It's off.
Now you just want to walk it up with a couple screwdrivers.
We don't need this on here anymore.
Alright, so let's talk about that. All right, so what we did here is we got that ring clip up a little bit. It took three screwdrivers, 2 people to do. That's the hardest part of doing this. Then he released the pressure on this once we got that spring clip out of the groove, and that allowed it to where the spring clip's not going to go back down in that groove and snap in and cause us grief having to remove it again. Pretty tough to start because we didn't want to break this, so we had to work gently doing it. So now we're just going to take some screwdrivers around on that ring clip and go ahead and move it out of its way.
This thing's going to explode as soon as we take this clip off.
No, shouldn't.
Oh, there's a lot of pressure behind this.
Go ahead and walk your side. It's a very short spring. Okay. Walk your side. Let me know, I can't see because your hand in the way.
Sorry.
Go from the bottom, here you go. Alright. So here's the ring clip as I was talking about. It looks like a bull ring that would go in a nose. It does not have the little ends that have the circles you can remove. It would be super easy if they did. It was a bear. I'm not gonna lie. That's the hardest process in this whole thing. So now we've got the horn button. This is basically a ring connector here. We can pull out, and you can see it's just got some brass on the other side. It rides against a little tab here. We will clean all that up, put some dielectric grease on this. But if your horn's not working, it could either be your switches and your steering plate, or this piece right here may be busted or something like that. But this is what causes the horn to work.
Let me see that. Do you have a marker?
I do. You go to put this, let me see that plate real quick. So this is the plate that I called the Chinese star. Look at it. It's a lock plate is what it is. And again, as you go to turn your steering wheel, whatever angle it's in, when you turn that key and pull the key out, the little shaft goes in there. And when it does, it kind of locks the steering wheel. If it's out of place and your steering wheel is not locked, just turn the steering wheel, all of a sudden pops up, and that's what causes the steering wheel to lock to where it can't be controlled. Now, this is keyed, so pay attention to these gears inside, or these teeth. There is a side that's missing a tooth. That is keyed to go in the right way. Do not put it in the wrong way, because some people do, and they really booger up this shaft. You booger that up, you're basically taking the steering wheel out and replacing that shaft, putting a new one in at the knuckle. All right, so now that we have the steering wheel apart, I'm going to go ahead and remove this shaft. It is just a Phillips tip screwdriver. Take it out, a small little screw. So if you happen to have a loose steering or a turning signal that's kind of getting old and floppy, it's probably just come loose here in the plastic. So we can remove that, and it just comes out. You can see it's just a plate. For that, I'm gonna put the screw back in because it's not gonna stop us from getting anything done to this car. This mechanism in here, I'm gonna turn it like I'm doing a right-hand turn. There is a screw to take it out, a Phillips tip screw as well. So we're going to remove that. While it's in that same position, you can get to all 3 of the screws. So there is one to the top near the ignition, one to the far left. Get it out. The screw is loose. And then one on the bottom, we're going to get to it as well. Now I imagine these screws are the same size, but I'm going to check that, make sure one isn't different, things like that, once we get this apart.
Pull the wire.
All right, screws are the same, so I'm just going to hand those to be put away.
There's a third one.
And in our situation, what's causing us the grief is this switch for the emergency switch. Older car, we were cleaning the interior, and son just asked, what is this for? He pushed it in, and ever since it's pushed in, it's never released the emergency flasher. So we've had to pull the flasher for the last few years because we don't drive the car much. And that's why, because it just kept flashing the lights and it was giving us grief, so we couldn't really, take the vehicle out. You can get this out to look at it. There's some wiring here that goes into a channel. There's a connector down below on the steering column around the brake pedal that does disconnect. Then you'll have to disconnect the harness. If we go to replace this unit, and I have one on order, I will put a pull wire on that, so as I pull that harness out this way, I now have a pull wire to rehook the new harness up to pull it back down into place to get into place. Now my goal is, since this is original, it's lasted 50 or about 45 years before it went out, got stuck. It probably just needs to be cleaned up a little bit, and if that's the case, we'll reuse the old one, because it gets a lot of this grease they used in here, and it just gets gunky, things like that. It gets thick and doesn't want to release the parts. So I may take this out with a wiring harness and put it in an ultrasonic tank with some cleaner, and then blow it out, make sure it's dry, and then retest to see if that works. Alright, so we found the source of our problem. Basically, the switch, the emergency part of the switch, we just had to push that lever over, clean it up. Now, I do have a new switch on order. I could take that out, but it looks like to be a super pain in the ass to get the wiring harness back down through the steering column. Now, I'm sure somebody's going to flame you, said it isn't, you should have done it right. We cleaned up things a little bit. We're still going to clean it up, get some of that grease, things like that. So we put it back together. Now, on this top part here, there is a barrel, a tab that goes into a slot. Don't know what that really does. I think it makes another connection of some type. So when you put that switch mechanism back in there, it will sit flush. It won't rock back and forth. If it rocks back and forth, you don't have this tab in the right spot on the back side of that switch. So we put the 3 screws back in, put our turn signal lever back in. Now we're ready to roll to start putting the lock ring in, the pain in the ass ring, snap ring to take off, and then start our assembly process in reverse. Alright, so now we went ahead and cleaned up the button contact for the horn, put our plate on for the horn, put a little bit of dielectric grease. Don't put too much, because you don't want this shit heating up and going down, and these cars get really hot. But just enough to make contact. We put the shaft on there, we're going to put the horseshoe back on there, and then when we get it centered on, it's going to push that lock ring back down into place where we need it to, and that'll allow us to get the snap ring on. Alright, so we actually have to put that little snap ring on that shaft first, otherwise you'll never get it back on. If that doesn't work, then we'll just put it on to the steering shaft itself and go that route, because I think that may be the better route to go with this. But you got to get the O-ring in place and then put the horseshoe compression clamp back on. It's going to push that lock plate back down so we can get the OGs clip back on. This is not a fun process because you don't want to booger up the splines, but that ring is a bear. I mean, it is just it's nuts how hard it is to deal with this ring. So we're going to stop it here so you don't see us fighting and cussing getting this thing on, and we'll show you once we get it on to test everything out. So Aaron came up with an ingenious plan. You put the snap ring on the steering column shaft, or the steering shaft itself, and then you put that particular, I don't know, the shaft on there or the bolt assembly. That's going to push that ring down towards the locking plate. Then when we drive that locking plate down, it'll be an easy just pushing it down with a couple screwdrivers, won't mess our splines up, and it'll snap into place. Once it snaps into place, slowly take and drive that bolt back out with a nut to make sure that when that horseshoe compression clamp, that it all comes off slowly and locks into place and doesn't, snap off, hit you in the face or the chest.
Bam.
We're going to line that steering wheel dust cover up. We cleaned it off a little bit, had some dust on it. We're going to put the screws in. They're real small screws, so it doesn't take a lot. Didn't have to tighten it down too much because there wasn't a lot of force to get off. Once that's done, then really the only thing we got to deal with is the steering wheel, and it's a simple process. We line the steering wheel up, and when we go to put it on, we don't want it to turn sideways 2-3 degrees, because then when you do, you're always going to hate that your steering wheel's never lined up. But we'll get that lined up, make sure that it's done right. The bolt will push the steering wheel back into place, and then we're wrapping it up. Alright, so we're getting ready to put the steering wheel on. We moved the steering wheel a little bit, so now you have an alignment issue. So we just pushed it on lightly, we didn't drive the nut all the way down to push it onto the splines, because what we will probably do is take this vehicle out, test it when it's going straight, to see if the steering wheel needs to move over a tooth or two. because nobody wants to be going down the road with a steering wheel that's jacked up, turned to the left or to the right too much. So we're going to just put it together lightly with just the bolt to hold it to where we can still steer the car, don't lose control, but then go back and just, if we like the way it's centered up, we'll bolt it up, be done. If we don't like the way it is, we're going to pull the steering wheel back off, move it a tooth, retest it. That way we get the steering wheel lined properly. All right, so we're wrapping up here. We went ahead and test drove the vehicle, made sure that this steering wheel is aligned as best as we could. It's probably off by 1 tooth, but it's a 50-year-old car and things wear out. What we didn't want is the steering wheel to be cocked about 15 degrees, 20 degrees, and then be annoying as hell every time you're driving it. So we just took it around the block, tested it out, pulled it off, moved it over a tooth to 2 teeth, and got it lined up as best we could. So when we put the steering wheel back in, you kind of push it in by hand, and then you put the bolt on, and the bolt will be what drives it down onto the shaft itself, onto the splines. That's how you get it put back together. Now we're going to clean the centerpiece up, bolt it in from the back. We're not going to show that video because that's pretty self-explanatory. But that is a 1970 Monte Carlo version of how to get in and correct the turn signals, or to get to the turn signal switch, all of that. I'll do a video here in a little bit. Probably tomorrow we're going to do some more work on the car. It'll be a go around on the car so everybody can just see kind of what we're dealing with and what we have here. All right, so we're to the point of putting the cover back onto the steering wheel. When we did that, it was kind of tricky because the first time the horn didn't work. Well, if you remember, on the opposite side of that cover, there's a spring and some wires. That spring has to go in the hole where the plastic slip connector is, or whatever you want to call it for the horn. But the trick of it is you got to push with your finger, get down in between the steering column and that plastic cover, and push that spring all the way down into that hole to where there's a white plastic with the wire connected to it. Is push that all the way down and then put the cover back on. If you don't, what will happen is the spring tends to bend over and fold because it doesn't want to push down in that hole all the way, and then the horn won't work. So that's the only gotcha about that cover. We are going to put 2 bolts in, or screws in, to get it done tonight, and then we're going to replace all 4 screws at a later time because on the back there they're rounded out. Previous owner may have gotten into this car or something, but we're going to replace them so we don't have problems in the future.